Language is the first and final system. Before we can even conceive of a law, a scientific theory, or, just the simple idea of a number, we have to have the words to frame it. It's the invisible architecture supporting the grand cathedrals of human thought, from jurisprudence all the way to quantum mechanics. We are born into it, we think with it, and we use it to pass our discoveries on to the next generation. It's not merely a tool that we pick up and put down. It's actually the very medium in which consciousness swims. Without it, complex abstract thought is just not possible. Language is the operating system of the human mind, running silently and ceaselessly in the background of all our endeavors. We often take this extraordinary system for granted, much like we take for granted the air we breathe. Yet, to ignore its rules is to build our most cherished institutions on sand. The precision of a legal contract, the verifiability of a scientific paper, and the logic of a computer algorithm all depend on the integrity of language. This charter, then, is not an attempt to invent new rules, but rather to illuminate the foundational axioms that have always governed our ability to create, communicate, and comprehend. It's a return to first principles, a reminder that every word is a world, and every sentence a universe of interconnected logic. These principles aren't suggestions, they're the inescapable truths of how meaning itself is constructed. Consider this. You can't argue against the primacy of language without using language itself. The very act of refutation becomes a confirmation of its power. This self-verifying quality makes language unique among all systems of knowledge. It's both the map and the territory, the question and the answer. As we stand on the cusp of creating artificial intelligence that will converse with us, and as our legal and scientific worlds become ever more complex, a clear understanding of the system is no longer just an academic luxury. It's a practical necessity for ensuring clarity, preventing chaos, and building a future where truth can be reliably communicated and understood across all disciplines. This exploration will lay out the fundamental axioms of language as a recursive structure. We'll see how meaning is built layer by layer, from the simplest sound to the most complex social interaction. We'll observe how words, like planets, have a gravitational pull that keeps them from drifting into meaninglessness. And ultimately will affirm that the principle of reasoned discourse is not some dusty concept from ancient Greece, but the active, essential software that drives all human progress. This isn't just a study of words, it's a study of the architecture of reality itself as we humans perceive and shape it. The first axiom is simple, yet, honestly, pretty profound. No unit of language possesses meaning in isolation. Each component, from the humblest letter to the most elaborate paragraph, really just derives its significance from its relationship with the others. A letter, such as C, is basically just a shape on a page or a sound in the air. It doesn't have any inherent meaning. But place it next to A and a T, and suddenly a furry, four-legged creature with a penchant for naps and mischief springs to mind. The word cat only works because we've implicitly agreed that this specific sequence of sounds and symbols refers to that specific animal. Its meaning is relational, not absolute. This principle of interdependence is the bedrock of all communication. A word in turn is just a lonely vessel until it's placed within a sentence. Consider the word run. Does it mean to jog, to operate a company, a tear in a stocking, to flee? We can't know until it's placed in a context, a sentence that provides the necessary scaffolding. I will run a marathon. She will run the department. There is a run in my tights. The sentence gives the word its specific job, its role, its temporary but crucial purpose. The word relies on the sentence just as the letter relies on the word, and this dependency doesn't stop there. A sentence, too, can be ambiguous without the larger context of a paragraph or a conversation. He is here. Who is he? Where is here? The statement just hangs in the air, a fragment of information waiting for its anchor. It's only when we know we're standing outside a doctor's office and the nurse has just uttered these words that the sentence clicks into place with a clear, actionable meaning. The paragraph or dialogue provides the situational framework, turning a vague utterance into a concrete piece of information. Each level of language borrows its clarity from the level above it. So, the atomic unit of meaning is not a letter or a word, but the entire system itself. Every tiny piece is defined by its place within the whole, kind of like a single pixel that only makes sense as part of a complete image. To understand language is to understand relationships. That's the first and most fundamental truth. It's a system built not on solitary bricks, but on the mortar that binds them together. Proving this is as simple as uttering a single random letter, Q, and watching as your listener waits for the context that will give it meaning. Without that context, it's nothing. The second axiom flows directly from the first language, operates on a recursive ladder. Interpretation moves upward, from the simple to the complex, while verification moves downward, from the complex to the simple. Think of it as climbing a ladder to get a view, and then climbing back down to check that each rung is secure. We begin at the bottom with letters or phonemes, the basic sounds. We combine them to form morphemes, the smallest units of meaning, like un, re, or able. These morphemes assemble into words which then arrange themselves into sentences, which form paragraphs, and so on, all the way up to the highest level, pragmatics, the social context of the entire communicative act. When we hear or read something, our brains automatically perform this upward climb. We don't consciously register each letter, but we process them to recognize words, then parse the grammar of the sentence to understand its literal meaning, and finally use the context of the conversation or text to grasp the speaker's true intent. If someone shouts, "Fire!" in a crowded theater, we don't just register the four letters. We instantaneously climb the ladder. Letters form a word. The word denotes combustion. The sentence, an imperative one-word sentence, is a warning, and the pragmatic context, the theater, tells us to evacuate immediately. This upward process is how we build meaning. Verification, however, moves in the opposite direction. If there's confusion or a dispute over meaning, we have to travel back down the ladder. Imagine a legal contract where the intent is unclear. Lawyers will first look at the whole clause, the paragraph. If that's ambiguous, they'll scrutinize the specific sentence. If the sentence is the problem, they'll debate the definition of a single word. If the word itself is contested, they might even go down to the level of etymology and morphemes to prove its core historical meaning. This downward journey is how we test, clarify, and secure meaning. It's the process of due diligence for language. This recursive flow is constant and universal. We ascend to understand the big picture and descend to resolve the details. A scientist proposes a grand theory, the top of the ladder, but must be able to verify it with precise data and definitions, the bottom rungs. An AI learns by processing vast amounts of text, climbing up to find patterns. but is debugged by examining the specific lines of code and data points that caused an error, climbing down to find the fault. This two-way traffic on the ladder of language isn't optional. It's the fundamental dynamic of comprehension and validation in any field that relies on symbolic representation. Words are not static objects. They're living things. Axiom 3 states that words naturally undergo semantic drift, changing their meaning over time due to cultural and contextual shifts. However, this drift is perpetually constrained by etymological gravity, the pull of a word's origin and core structure. A word can wander, but it can never completely escape its roots. This dynamic tension is what keeps language both flexible and stable. A word like awful, for instance, originally meant full of awe or awe-inspiring. One might have described a magnificent cathedral or a powerful king as awful. It was a term of deep respect and reverence. Over centuries, its usage drifted. The awe it inspired became associated more with fear and terror than with wonder. From there, it was a short leap to its modern meaning of very bad or terrible. This is semantic drift in action, a slow communal evolution of meaning based on how a word is used. The same has happened with nice, which once meant silly or ignorant, from the Latin meaning unaware. Today, it means something pleasantly agreeable. The word has drifted so far that its modern usage is almost the opposite of its original sense. Language adapts to the needs and attitudes of its speakers, like a river carving a new path through the landscape. Yet this drift is not infinite. Etymological gravity always exerts a subtle pull, anchoring a word to its history. This is why we can still feel a faint echo of awe in awful, a whisper of its former grandeur, even when describing a terrible film. The morphemes, the building blocks, awe and full are still there, acting as a historical anchor. This gravity becomes crucial when precision is required. In law or philosophy, one might intentionally invoke the etymological root of a word to clarify an argument, pulling it back from its drifted colloquial meaning toward its more stable, foundational sense. For example, to understand justice, one might return to its Latin root, meaning upright or equitable. This principle ensures that language does not dissolve into chaos. While we embrace the living, breathing nature of words, we retain a mechanism for stability. Etymology is the ultimate fact checker for a word's identity. It acts like a gravitational center, preventing words from flying off into a private, subjective orbit of meaning. A word can stretch, bend, and evolve, but the cord of its origin, its very DNA, ensures it remains part of a shared, intelligible system. This balance between flexibility and stability is what makes language such a powerful and resilient tool for communication across generations. Words do not merely describe the world, they actively create it. This is the fourth axiom. Language is generative. To name something is to call it into a distinct category of existence. To make a promise is to create an obligation that did not exist a moment before. To pass a law is to generate a new set of rules that tangibly alter human behavior and consequence. This is not a mystical notion, but a practical, observable fact of social reality. Before the concept of zero was named and defined, it was an elusive, almost non-existent idea. Once it had a name, a symbol, and a place in the system, mathematics was revolutionized. Consider the simple act of a declaration. When a referee in a football match shouts "goal," they are not just describing the ball crossing the line. They are performing a linguistic act that creates the reality of the goal. Their words change the score, alter the state of the game, and determine the subsequent actions of every player on the field. The word generates the fact. Similarly, in a courtroom, when a judge says, "I sentence you to 5 years in prison," they are not offering an opinion. Their utterance creates a new legal reality for the defendant, a binding state of affairs backed by the full force of the state. This generative power is rooted in shared agreement. We have collectively invested certain words and speech acts with the authority to create and alter our social and conceptual worlds. A promise is only binding because we all agree on what the act of promising entails. A contract is only valid because we have a shared system of law that recognizes its language as generative of legal duties. This is language as a tool, not for description, but for construction. We build our societies, our relationships, and our institutions out of words. They are the bricks and mortar of everything, from a marriage vow to a United Nations resolution. Understanding this generative function is critical for any field that seeks to shape reality. For lawmakers, it means recognizing that every statute is an act of creation. For scientists, it highlights the power of naming a new discovery, thereby carving out a new area of inquiry. For AI developers, it presents the challenge of creating systems that can not only describe, but also perform actions through language, to understand a command not just as data, but as an instruction to generate a specific outcome. The words "you're hired" or "you're fired" are perhaps the most common and powerful examples of this principle in our daily lives. They don't just describe a state, they create one. Section 6. Axiom 5. Predictive neologism and the Lego brick principle. Language is not a closed system. It must evolve to describe new realities. Axiom 5 outlines the principle of predictive neologism, the capacity to build new, precise, and universally understandable words from existing morphemes. This is the Lego brick principle of language. Morphemes, the smallest meaningful units like bio, geo, techno, logi, nomi, graphy, are like individual Lego bricks. They have a fixed shape and meaning. By combining them in novel but logical ways, we can construct new terms for new concepts with immediate clarity and without causing confusion. This process is predictive because the meaning of the new word is not arbitrary. It is predicted by the sum of its parts. When the concept of writing with light was invented, the word photography was constructed. It was not a random string of sounds. It was built from Greek morphemes, light, and to write or draw. Anyone with a basic knowledge of these roots could immediately deduce its meaning: light writing. This method avoids the ambiguity that comes from repurposing an existing word. It creates a clean, precise vessel for a new idea, ensuring there is no semantic overlap or confusion with older terms. This principle is essential for interdisciplinary work. As science and technology advance, fields begin to merge, requiring a shared vocabulary. Imagine a field combining biology, geology, and chemistry to study life in extreme environments. Instead of a clumsy phrase, one could construct a term like geobiochemistry. The meaning is instantly clear and transparent to practitioners in all three parent fields. It is efficient, logical, and prevents the siloing of knowledge that occurs when different disciplines use different, often conflicting, jargon for the same concept. It is a universal translator built from the ancient DNA of our own language. For AI development, this principle is a roadmap for creating robust and scalable language models. An AI trained to understand morphemes can theoretically decipher or even generate plausible new words for novel concepts it encounters. It could understand that cryptozoology is the study of hidden animals, even if it has never encountered the specific term before, simply by knowing the morphemes crypto, hidden, zoo, animal, and logi, study of. This is far more powerful than simple word memorization. It is a generative understanding of language, allowing for true adaptation and learning. It is how language has always scaled to meet the demands of human innovation. Section 7. The Universal Operating System. Logos in action. At the heart of this entire linguistic system is a principle the ancient Greeks called. It is often translated simply as word, reason, or logic, but its true meaning is far more encompassing. It is the underlying operating system for all coherent thought and communication. It is the principle of intelligible structure, the implicit rule that says things must connect logically for meaning to emerge. It governs law, science, mathematics, and philosophy. Without, all these fields would collapse into a babel of disconnected assertions. It is the universal grammar of reason itself. In law is the foundation of a logical legal argument. A judgment is not merely an opinion, it must be a reasoned conclusion derived from evidence and precedent, following a clear chain of logic. The entire structure of a legal case, from the initial claim to the final verdict, is an exercise in applied. Each piece of evidence must be relevant. Each step of the argument must follow from the last, and the conclusion must be a rational consequence of the premises. When a lawyer objects, that does not follow. They are making a direct appeal to. They are pointing out a bug in the logical code of the argument. In science is manifest as the scientific method. A hypothesis is a proposition. An experiment is a structured test of that proposition. The results are the data, and the conclusion is the logical inference drawn from that data. A scientific paper is a written monument to meticulously laying out the chain of reasoning so that others can test and verify it. The principles of falsifiability, reproducibility, and logical consistency are all direct applications of. It ensures that scientific knowledge is not a collection of random facts, but a structured, coherent, and self-correcting system. This same operating system runs everything from computer programming to everyday conversation. A computer program is pure, a set of instructions where each step must logically follow the last for the program to run. A simple, rational conversation where you make a point and support it with evidence is an informal exercise in. It is so fundamental to our thinking that we often don't notice it, yet it is the invisible force that separates sense from nonsense, argument from assertion, and knowledge from noise. It is the universal protocol for transmitting truth. Section 8. Practical Applications. A Charter for Clarity. The axioms laid out in this charter are not merely theoretical. They have concrete practical applications across all major fields of human endeavor, serving as a guide for clarity, precision, and integrity. In law, these principles can be used to resolve contractual disputes. By tracing a contentious word down the recursive ladder, from the clause to the sentence to the word's etymological root, a court can anchor its interpretation in a stable, historical meaning rather than a drifted, colloquial one. This prevents the exploitation of ambiguity and ensures that legal documents are robust and defensible. It is a methodology for justice rooted in linguistic truth. In science and mathematics, the principle of predictive neologism offers a clear path for naming new discoveries. Instead of creating opaque jargon or repurposing old words, scientists can construct new terms from Greek and Latin morphemes. This would make interdisciplinary research far more seamless. A chronocardiogram would be instantly understood as a time-based heart graph without needing a glossary. This fosters a universal scientific language, accelerating collaboration and reducing the errors that arise from terminological confusion. It makes science more accessible and its findings more transparent. For the development of artificial intelligence, these axioms provide a foundational blueprint for a more sophisticated language model. An AI built on this recursive system would understand that language is more than just statistical patterns. It would be able to perform downward verification to ask for clarification when a command is ambiguous, like asking, by run, do you mean execute the program or analyze the performance? It could also use the Lego brick principle to understand and even coin new terms, demonstrating a deeper, more human-like grasp of language's generative and logical structure. This would be a step toward true artificial general intelligence. Finally, for interdisciplinary work of any kind, this charter serves as a common reference point. When a sociologist, a physicist, and an economist collaborate, their greatest barrier is often language. By acknowledging as their shared operating system and using these axioms to bridge their terminological gaps, they can build a shared vocabulary. They can agree on definitions, trace misunderstandings down the recursive ladder, and co-create new terms for the novel concepts they discover together. This is not just about better communication. It is about creating a unified framework for knowledge in an increasingly interconnected world. Section 9. Conclusion. The self-verifying proof. We have journeyed through the foundational axioms of language, from the interdependent nature of its smallest parts to the grand, generative power of its highest functions. We have seen that language is not a haphazard collection of words, but a deeply logical, recursive, and self-regulating system. It is a ladder we climb to build meaning and descend to verify truth. Its words, though they may drift on the currents of culture, are forever anchored by the gravity of their origins. It is a system that does not just describe reality, but actively creates and shapes it through the power vested in declarations, promises, and laws. The ultimate proof of this system is that it is inescapable. Every word you have read in this charter is itself a demonstration of the principles it describes. Each sentence derives its meaning from the words within it, and the words from the letters, and the entire argument from the logical flow of. To understand this text is to engage in the very recursive process it details. To argue against it, you must use the same system, relying on shared definitions and logical structure to make your point, thereby proving its foundational role. Language is, in this perfect way, a complete and self-verifying proof. This understanding is more critical now than ever, as we build legal frameworks for a globalized world, create scientific models of staggering complexity, and program artificial intelligences that will soon be our collaborators. We must be masters of our primary tool. A failure to appreciate the logic of language is a failure that will cascade through every system we build upon it. Ambiguity in law leads to injustice. Imprecision in science leads to error. A lack of logical grounding in AI leads to unpredictable and potentially dangerous outcomes. Clarity is not a matter of style, it is a matter of function and safety. Therefore, let this charter stand as a reminder. Every act of communication is an act of construction. Every word is a choice, and every sentence is a structure. By honoring the inherent logic of language, its recursive nature, its generative power, and its anchoring in, we do more than just speak or write well. We build a more robust, reliable, and truthful world. Language is the beginning of all knowledge, the framework for all reason, and the final recursive anchor in our search for meaning. It is the first and final system, and its rules are not to be broken.